Hi, and welcome to Anne's Family Recipe. Today I'm making Philly-style roast pork sandwiches. My husband was in Philadelphia last weekend and he really wanted to grab a roast pork sandwich from Nick's, which is a stall at the Reading Terminal Market downtown. Now, unfortunately, he was there on a Sunday, so at the time they were closed. But that got me thinking about the roast pork sandwiches in Philadelphia. You can find them a lot of other places besides Nick's. Actually, a lot of the cheesesteak stands also have a roast pork sandwich. And typically it's really thinly sliced roast pork on a nice soft bun with sharp provolone cheese and really garlicky, slightly spicy broccoli rabe. So I'm gonna put that all together today and recreate it in my kitchen. The first thing we're gonna work on is our broccoli rabe. Now this is kind of an unusual ingredient. I don't cook with it very often, but I found it in the produce section of my regular grocery store. It's kind of like a leafy green that looks a little bit like broccoli on top. And I cut about the bottom 2 inches of the stalks off because they can be pretty tough. And we want this to be nice and tender on our sandwich. The first thing I'm going to do is boil my broccoli rabe just for a couple of minutes so it gets nice and tender, and also some of the bitterness is drawn out of it. I'm gonna salt my water really, really well, and that should help pull some of that bitterness out. And then we're gonna saute these greens in a little bit of olive oil that's infused with a lot of garlic and some red chili flakes. I have a big pot of water over here on my stove that's come to a rolling boil. I'm gonna salt it very well, probably with about a tablespoon of salt. So next we'll add our broccoli rabe. That's a big handful, there we go. Let me just grab a spoon here to kind of help submerge it in the water. There we go. And I like mine to be pretty soft. I don't want it to be crisp at all. So I'm gonna let this boil for a few minutes, and then we'll transfer it into our skillet and saute it in the oil, garlic, and pepper flakes. So today I'm using 4 garlic cloves, and I'm just gonna use the side of my knife and smash the cloves. You can see that helps the peel come off really easily. And this is a great technique you can use anytime you're working with garlic. If you wanna chop these up, you could. That would give you a really strong garlic flavor. But what I'm gonna do is just use these smashed cloves, put them in the olive oil while it's still cold, and then once the temperature comes up, it's gonna infuse that garlic flavor into the olive oil. So I'm gonna smash the rest of my cloves here so I can get the skin off, and then we'll add them to our oil. So I have about a tablespoon of olive oil in my skillet. I'm gonna add in my garlic cloves while it's still cold, and then we'll turn the temperature on to about like medium, like a low, medium high, if that makes sense. I'm at level 6 here. And we'll just let these kind of come to a sizzle and cook for a few minutes, and then we can fish them out and add our greens and our red pepper. My broccoli rabe boiled for about 4 minutes, and my garlic cloves sizzled for that same amount of time. So now I'm just going to fish out the big cloves of garlic, and then we'll transfer the broccoli rabe into this hot skillet. Now this is a technique that I read about in an article online, so we're gonna try it out today. You could blanch these by like plunging these into cold ice water and then dry them off and then pan fry them. But I read that if you just transfer them right over into the hot oil, it makes them a little bit kind of saucier. And I really like that concept because it'll just add a nice kind of extra texture to our sandwich and a little bit of a sauce. So we're gonna take these out. They're nice and tender. Even like the stalky bottoms are soft, which is good. That's what we want. So I'm just gonna move those over. Just be careful, of course, because when water meets oil, it's gonna sizzle a little bit, but that's okay. So then I'm just gonna saute these for a couple minutes. And let me grab my chili flakes. Let's see, they're over here. And this is totally to taste. You don't have to add any red pepper flakes, or you could add a ton. I'll probably add maybe like an 1/8 of a teaspoon, just a little sprinkling. Give a little bit of heat, a little extra flavor to our sandwich. It looks so good. Now, if you don't want to use broccoli rabe, that is totally fine. I've made these before just with a bag of spinach. That's even faster because you can skip the boiling step. You can just throw a whole bag of fresh leaf spinach right into your skillet and wilt the greens down, saute them, and it's the perfect green for your sandwich. But this is a little bit more of an authentic ingredient that I'm using here today. And it smells awesome. Next, I'm gonna slice up my roasted pork tenderloin. Now to prepare this, I started with a 9 by 13 inch glass baking dish that I sprayed with baking spray just so it wouldn't stick. Then I placed my tenderloin in, it was about 2 pounds, and I seasoned it generously on both sides with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika. And then I added about a 1/2 cup of water into the dish just to add a little bit more moisture into the pan while it baked. And I covered it with aluminum foil. That would really hold in all of the moisture to try and keep the meat as juicy as possible. So this roasted in the oven for a little under an hour at 350 degrees. It kind of depends on how big your piece of meat is, but for a cut of pork, it's safe to eat once it reaches 145 degrees on the inside. If you want it cooked totally through, you want to wait until it reaches 160 degrees. But mine is totally cooked through, but it still feels and looks nice and juicy and tender. So now we're going to slice into it. I'm just taking a very sharp knife. I'm going to try my best to cut it pretty thin. It's not going to be quite as thin as how they do it like at Denick's restaurant, but the meat is still really tender, and of course it's going to have tons of flavor. So I think it's still gonna work. So now we get to assemble our sandwich. I'm starting with this nice fluffy hoagie bun. It's a little bit crispy on the outside, but nice and soft on the inside. And to that, I'm just taking 1 large slice of very sharp provolone cheese. A little bit of this cheese goes a long way. It's very pungent, but it is perfect. It's key to these sandwiches. Next, I'm going to add a couple of slices of our roast pork that, if I'm being honest, I already sampled and it tastes amazing. So I'm super excited to eat this when it's totally assembled. And the last touch is our broccoli rabe. Does that make anybody else think of The Office? When one of Andy's buddies from his a cappella group, broccoli rabe. I might add a little bit more. There we go. And there's our sandwich. Now I get to try out my Philly-style roast pork sandwich. That's really, really good. Wow, it tastes a lot like the original. So the broccoli rabe, it is ever so slightly bitter, but not overpoweringly so. It's really, really good. And definitely very authentic tasting. But of course, like I said, you can totally sub in spinach and it would be equally as delicious. It's a little bit spicy too. That's good. I like that kick. And the roast pork is nice and tender. I'm glad I seasoned it up a little bit on the outside. It has really good flavor. Kind of adds to the flavor of the whole sandwich. And then that sharp provolone. Honestly, I would not eat it by itself, but on this sandwich, it is perfection. It is so, so delicious. I'm going in for more. One other thing that I wanted to mention, just in case you can find it at your grocery store, I used to make these sandwiches for a really quick weeknight supper with roasted pork tenderloin from my deli. There's a brand called Dietz & Watson that makes all kinds of deli meats, and at my grocery store, in years past, they have had a roast pork tenderloin that they would just slice for you just like regular lunch meat, and it would make assembling these a breeze. Now, I tried 3 different branches of my grocery store, and I finally got an answer today that they discontinued the product, which makes me so sad. But if you want to check your deli to see if they have that roast pork tenderloin that they can slice for you, it makes creating these sandwiches such a breeze. But of course, a homemade roast pork tenderloin isn't half bad either. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram at Anne's Family Recipe. Thank you so much for joining me today in my kitchen, and I'll see you again soon with another family recipe. For the full recipe, check the description box below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen.